Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Amber Gregory, Manager of Corporate Social Responsibility at TP. Alongside me today is Leonard Price, TP's Military Program Manager and co-chair of our Veterans Employee Resource Group, also United States Army Retired First Sergeant. Also, we have Leanne Hancock, TP's Talent Acquisition Recruiter, military spouse, and caregiver to Staff Sergeant Hancock, retired United States Army Aviation. We are all very excited to host today's podcast, and we have a very special guest with us from the Wounded Warriors Speak program, Danielle Green. Ordinarily, a high-level NCAA basketball player does not join the military after graduating from college, but Danielle is far from ordinary. Her call to serve others became her driving force after her Division I basketball career, and in 2004, she found herself on the top of a rooftop in Iraq, injured and praying that she would survive. Luckily, she did, and her passion for serving others has led her to help countless people over the last 17 years. She has counseled warriors in mental health, aided in veterans' transition to civilian life, and now travels the country to share her powerful story in hope that more veterans will reach out for the help that they need. So please join me in welcoming a true all-star in the veteran community, a woman who has dedicated her life to serving others, Ms. Danielle Green.
Thank you, Amber, for the introduction. Teleperformance, thank you for honoring and empowering wounded warriors. So my question is, how will you measure your life? When I was younger, success was simple. I measured my life by numbers. How many points are scored on the court? How many awards I won? How many times I proved that I was the best? And then I joined the military and the numbers changed. How many sit-ups I could do, how many push-ups, how fast I could run the two mile time, that mattered. How proficient I was at the range, mastering, several different weapon systems. For senior military leaders like my friend Leonard, it's about missions completed, objectives achieved, lives impacted. But then life threw me a number that I never expected, and thousands of others. Last year, I was asked to join a group of veterans in DC, organized by Wounded Warrior Project, to advocate for the Richer Star Act. Now, the Richer Star Act provides full retirement pay and disability benefits to combat injured veterans who have been medically retired with less than 20 years of service. That's around 55,000 service members who would be positively impacted by this act. These service members were forced to leave the military due to various medical conditions. I didn't choose to lose my arm after it was blown off by a rocket attack. And just like that, the life I had built, the purpose I had known was gone. Almost 21 years ago, I almost didn't make it home. I was laying on a rooftop in 115-degree heat in Baghdad, Iraq. I had just been hit by a rocket-propelled grenade blast. And I didn't realize at the time that my dominant left arm was gone. See, I have this beautiful cosmetic prosthetic. So when I wear long sleeves, people can't tell, but that rocket separated my arm completely from my body. I was scared. I was nervous. I was in shock. I was angry. And in that moment, I prayed. And I prayed for three things. And I looked into the heavens and I said, God, I want to live. I want to be able to tell my story. And I want a child. And here I am. Guess what? Here I am right here today with you all on this podcast, sharing my story. And every day I get to make a difference in people's lives. And my son, Daniel, he's 10 years old and he's my entire world. And if I saw you all in person, you say, oh my God, her hair is graying quickly. Well, that's because of that 10-year-old kid. He's talented, he's super smart, and I'm so glad that I survived so he can be a part of this world. and see that there are good people who have veterans' backs when they come home. Despite my loss, I'm proud of my service. I'm proud of the impact I'm making, and I'm proud to be a female veteran. But my story is just one of 16.2 million living veterans. So I challenge you to take the time to listen to a veteran's story and figure out how you can be impactful. And that's what this podcast is about today, how we can be impactful and continue. I was left with a question I didn't know how to answer. Why now? And too many veterans, that question leads to a heartbreaking statistic. Every year, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs conducts the nation's largest analysis of veteran suicide rates. Unfortunately, the results are chilling. The department's latest report found increasing suicide rates. Between 17 and 22 veterans per day are taking their lives. And that's a devastating figure that we all, not just the military, not just the Department of Veterans Affairs, all of us should be able, we should address that. The report reflects that the fact that veterans are 1.5 times more likely to die by suicide than the non-adult population. Over 4 times as many veterans of the post 9/11 wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, have died by suicide than by war operations. I share those alarming numbers to illustrate that the need is greater now ever, and WWP needs your help. If you believe that everything is going to be okay, then there's hope. Wounded Warrior Project gave me and hundreds of critically wounded servicemen and women hope. And hope is so important because it provides a way forward when the road ahead appears bleak. I mean, when I was on that rooftop, I didn't know if I was going to survive. People ask me all the time, Danielle, what motivated you to join the service in your mid-20s? And I was one of those kids that back in the 80s, I loved the military commercials. Be all you can be. The proud, the few, the Marines, and they had their sabers, and they just was so sharp and precise. And I thought, man, I want to serve my country. But then I remember I also was in love with this Catholic university that was 90 minutes down the road. And I didn't even know that until I was in high school. It was the Notre Dame football team. And I fell in love with that program. Touchdown Jesus. It's a 7-story mural of Jesus on our Hesburgh Library, the Basilica, which is the church, and that golden dome. And I'm not Catholic, but I felt this strong spiritual connection. And I said at the age of 8 or 9, I want to go to the University of Notre Dame. And everybody I told laughed at me. And I never understood that until I actually got there. And now I'm older and I laugh now. And so a few years later, I discovered basketball. And I remember going to the high school basketball court when I was supposed to be riding my bike. And a stranger saw me playing and he said, if you really work on your game, you could earn a scholarship. And I thought, wow, a scholarship could be my golden ticket out of the inner city of Chicago. And so I worked, determination, perseverance, not engaging in, violence, because there's a lot to do in Chicago. If I have anyone out there in urban society, I kept my eyes on the goal ahead. And at the age of 17, Hall of Fame Coach McGraw came out and saw me play and offered me a scholarship. My dreams, everything I had worked for had come true. Went off to Notre Dame. It was tough. It's a culture shock experience, but I had a wonderful experience. And we're in March Madness right now. So I love this time of year. And I was part of a Final Four team. I participated in the NCAA tournament every year I was there. And after averaging 1.1 points a game as a freshman, I left as the 16th all-time leading scorer. I even tried out for the Detroit Shock WNBA team, making the final cut. After college, I was ready to serve my community. So I became a school teacher, and I did that for a couple of years. And I prepared to go to graduate school to study education. And then 9/11 occurred. And I thought about joining the military then, but I was trying to start my career path. But then a year later, I couldn't shake that 8-year-old who wanted to serve her country. So after researching each branch, I decided to enlist in the U.S. Army as a military police officer, thinking that I go in as an E4 specialist, become a non-commissioned officer, a sergeant, and then maybe go to officer candidate school. And so that was the path that I wanted to go. And I did this because I wanted to show youngsters, people and the kids in the inner city, that anything is obtainable with the right mindset. 1 year after enlisting, I deployed to Iraq, January of 2004, as the company commander's gunner, top gunner at that in the MP Corps, which I'm very proud of. After 4 months in Iraq, May 25th, 2004, there I was on that rooftop. And if you remember, I was hit by an RPG, but I wasn't hit immediately. Something hit the barrier 2 stories below, and I picked up my weapon. And as I was about to return fire, that's when I was hit. And at the time, in that moment, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't know that I was hit by a rocket. I just fell to the ground. You know, after I said that prayer that I said at the beginning, I felt a surge of energy hit my body, as if I could actually get up and run. And I tried, but I couldn't. And when I looked at the left side of my body, my uniform was shredded with blood everywhere, from up here to my leg, but I could still move my leg, but never knew my arm was missing. And my teammates came and they performed first aid, and I was medevaced. And when I woke up at the hospital in the green zone, my entire chain of command was standing there, and they were crying, and I couldn't figure out why they were crying, because I was alive. But then that's when I decided to look down as I'm laying in the bed, and I saw my right arm, but my left arm was short. And so I looked to my Master Sergeant Harrelson. I said, "Is my arm gone?" And she said, "Yes, bud, it's gone." And then I cried. Unspeakable sorrow hit my soul. And I cried because I knew that that was the end of my military career. Everything I had worked for up to that point. I was actually scheduled to go to the board 3 days. I was on my way to becoming a sergeant. And just like that, it was gone. And I questioned, like, why me? Why me? But then I remember my first prayer had been answered. I was alive. Life-changing events. At some point, we're all going to have a life-changing event. And how do you plan for a traumatic, life-altering event? You go to the doctor for a routine checkup, and you find out you have cancer or some other ailment that you wasn't even expecting. What about retirement, career, a devastating breakup? What's going on in the world today? You cannot plan for these things, but you can live your life in a way that allows you to accept those setbacks as they occur. And you move forward and you create these new opportunities. And it's not easy, but I'd rather choose that path than to keep looking in the rearview mirror. At Walter Reed Army Medical Center, I had a choice to make. Was I going to be bitter because of my loss, because of my circumstances, or was I going to be better? And Wounded Warrior Project helped me to become better by building connections and a community inside the hospital and outside the hospital. And you have to remember, 21 years ago, Wounded Warrior Project was a grassroots program. So they didn't have all the wonderful programs that they have today, but they could offer me kindness and love and support and have my back when I needed them. And every Friday night, they would gather all the critically wounded, because there was a lot of amputees back then, and people with traumatic brain injury. They would gather us out, and we would go out and we would have dinner, and we'd break bread together, and we would have dinner, and they would bring in guest speakers like myself. And then later on, we would partner up with other organizations, and I learned how to play golf and go skeet shooting and ski and just all types of things that I never could have thought about, thanks to Wounded Warrior Project and their partnership. So they've always been about collaborating with other companies and organizations to help those veterans in their time of need. And I'm so grateful for them for that. And that's almost 21 years ago. And when I wasn't attending events, I still had to face my reality as an amputee. You know, I was left-hand dominant. So imagine the first 27 years of your life, you're using your dominant arm and it's gone. So I had to learn how to comb my hair, brush my teeth. Women, 2 hands is difficult to put on a bra. Try one. I had to learn how to put on earrings, you know, put on my watch. One time the occupational therapist said, you know, I want you to learn how to flip an egg. And I said, well, first of all, how am I supposed to hold the skillet when I don't even have a hand? And she just looked at me and she said, well, brace the handle here and then, you know, crack the egg and flip it. And so I tried to flip it. Now, listen, I'm not right-handed. The egg went across the room. And all we could do was just laugh about it. But sometimes you have to laugh instead of cry. And over my 8-month period at the hospital, I found the will to accept that my old life was gone, and I decided to create a new and equally meaningful life. The only problem was I was starting at ground zero. Yes, I had a college education, but no real work skill experiences. So I thought, how could I leverage my skills and abilities from my previous experiences? I knew that I still had all my faculties. I worked well with people. I was a good team player. I was intelligent. I had the ability to follow and lead, because I joined the military because I wanted to be a leader. So for me, I was confident that I could transition to the military to civilian life through education. I wanted to explore, so I decided I wanted to explore the field of education, but as a school counselor. So while I was still at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, I applied for several different graduate programs. And I took an assessment to figure out where I was. And so after 23 months of service, my military career was over. And despite my optimism and determination, I was still uncertain about my physical and emotional reality. I mean, I was a female. At the time, just think about 2004, 2005, it was still kind of unknown that women served in combat. And I was heading back to Chicago. And that was very, very scary for me. And so 5 months passed. I thought I would never hear from Wounded Warrior Project again. And then they called me out the blue. They were starting to expand. They had come up with a soldier ride. And a soldier ride is a 4-day cycling event for veterans with all disabilities. And they said, we want you to come out. And I said, first of all, I got one hand. How am I supposed to ride a bike? I don't have a bike. And my mindset was a little negative, but they said, always positive. Go to the local bike shop, tell them to modify a bike for you, talk to the VA and have them, you know, build you an adaptive device. Because for a long time, I didn't have that cosmetic arm. I had a hook. So when people saw me, they just stared at me. And so I had this hook, and this hook is pretty cool. But I got an adaptive device and I was able to ride. And that was the first time when I got on that bike and I rode through the streets of Chicago and I saw the first responders and the American patriots waving their flag, that I felt proud of my service. I felt proud to be a combat wounded veteran, and all my shame went away. And I started to blossom from there. I started working for the Chicago Board of Education. Eventually, I worked with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and life just really went well. And as I progressed as a professional, Wounded Warrior Project grew into the largest and most innovative service organization in the world. And you're probably wondering, what makes them innovative, Danielle? Well, they're innovative because they conduct a survey every year to find out our needs. What do we need? What could we be doing better? And they base their programs off of the needs of the veteran. So we went went from connection events to mental health programs to independence programs to warriors to work to financial literacy, and the list goes on. Now we have 18 programs, probably more than that. We have over 16 offices all over, including Hawaii and Germany. And it's just wonderful to be a part of an organization that did not forget me and that had my back in my most vulnerable time, unlike our Vietnam veterans who were forgot about. And I thank them. And if there's somebody on this podcast, Vietnam veteran, thank you for your service. So when you believe in a cause and you understand the why, you are motivated by a purpose that is bigger than yourself. Let me say that again. When you believe in a cause and you understand the why, you are motivated by a cause that is bigger than yourself. Let's help our veterans by uplifting them, helping them find new missions and a new purpose in life after the military. And let's help our veterans continue to transition to successful civilian lives. It's not about numbers all the time. So it's about what's inside the heart, the soul, and the mind. Thank you, Teleperformance.
Thank you, Danielle. Very compelling thoughts. Your story is one that, our employees are going to love to hear. So thank you so much for sharing all of those heartfelt things about your life and your time in the military and, all of the great things that Wounded Warrior does. As our employees may or may not know those specific things. So we appreciate you doing that.
You're welcome.
We've got a few questions, if you don't mind. I think Lynn and Leanne want to jump in and kind of ask you a few things. I'll let Lynn go first. Go ahead, Lynn.
Hey, Danielle. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And it was a true pleasure just getting to know you prior to this podcast. So thank you so much, man. Just the enthusiasm, the love that you have is just so infectious. So the first question that I have for you is what are some of the differences, Danielle, as it relates to the physical and emotional rehabilitation challenges faced between the male and the female wounded warriors?
So as a female veteran, when I was first injured, I had facial scars. And like I said, 20 something years ago, women fighting in combat was kind of unheard of. So when people saw people looking like me, they thought, well, gee, did you get hurt back in the rear on the fob, on the, back at the barracks? It's like, no, I got hurt, with serving with my fellow comrades. And so that's a whole mindset shift compared to like our Vietnam veterans when it was just guys out there. And so it's important for me, people like me that have physical and invisible scars, PTS, post-traumatic stress disorder, TBI, military sexual trauma, anxiety, clinical. It's important for us to get out there and create this awareness that women veterans are service women. We're out there and we're fighting just like our male counterparts. And there ain't no such thing as a frontline war. That's what people think. It's not like that. And so it's refreshing that 20 years later that the Department of Veterans Affairs, they're finally catching up. Whereas, 20 years ago when I went to the clinic, I was surrounded by men and, men, veterans, men, doctors, men, nurses. And now 20 years later, I can go to a women's clinic where the receptionists are women, the doctors are women, the nurses are women. I'm sitting with other women. And so that creates safety, a safety net for females. So it's just great to see the evolution of female veterans finally being recognized. So that's the biggest thing. I don't think male veterans have ever had major issues because they've been fighting wars since 1700. So they're known, but it's the women, and women used to fight back then too, spies and sneaking in as men. But I think finally we're being recognized, and I think Wounded Warrior Project has done a wonderful job with their women's initiative and advocating on Capitol Hill for more benefits and just policy changes to help serve women veterans better.
Well, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Leanne for her to ask a question or something too.
Okay. It was a wonderful hearing your story as well. Just the different aspects. You know, I hear things from my husband and from his comrades, but I never really get to speak to the female comrades. So definitely, thank you for sharing your story with us. What advice would you have for those wounded warriors that show the failure to thrive once they are out of the military?
Well, first of all, they need to know that they're not alone. And Wounded Warrior Project, they're trying to figure out how to be available for those service men and women even before they are discharged. And so they're in the process, and they might even be doing outreach now for that. And so, you know, I tell people, and I don't know how you look at this approach, but we're adults. We might have came in the military as 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, but you leave as 25, 26, 30, 40. And so sometimes you got to learn how to advocate for yourself. Nobody's going to find me if I'm suffering alone in my house. I have to be willing to put myself out there, make myself vulnerable. And that's why I'm passionate. And I consider myself an introvert, you know, and I remember when I first was injured, I wanted to just go back to Chicago, build out my basement, and I just wanted to stay in my basement. I didn't want to be bothered, but I said, no, I served my country honorably, so I deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to continue to live my life. And that's where TP comes in. You can help us. Just this podcast is empowering. Maybe there's a veteran out there in the organization that's struggling. You don't have to struggle. Wounded Warrior Project is out there, and there's a host of other organizations out there. So when I hear that staggering statistic of 17 to 22 veterans taking their lives every day, it's heartfelt, because it's like, why? You know, why? Or what can we be doing better to try to find those veterans and connect them? And so if you're a caregiver, a spouse, a dependent, you know somebody, your neighbor, you know, encourage them to seek help. And I know Wounded Warrior Project is a service organization for post 9/11 veterans, but they don't turn anyone down. We have a resource center that if someone called and there was, say, a Vietnam veteran having issues with their benefits, Wounded Warrior Project is going to figure out a way to help that person get their benefits. But the main thing I can say is there's no shame. And that's the main thing. There's no shame in asking for help. I mean, 21 years later, I still ask for help, you know, just to have perspective and to be aware of blind spots. And so that's what this podcast is about. So I really encourage TP employees and friends of to listen and to reach out. It's woundedwarriorproject.org, woundedwarriorproject.org.
So I know that you probably answered this question before, Danielle, but I just want to circle the wagon again and have you touch on it. So my question is, are there any positives that came from your time in Iraq that contributed to your overall views on life? So just give me from a more of a granular perspective, okay?
Just ask me that question one more time.
Yeah, sure. Are there any positives that came from your time in Iraq that contributes to your overall view on life today?
Gotcha. So I was in Iraq for 4 months, and Iraq gives you a different perspective. I think anytime you can go to a developing country, I don't think we're allowed to say third world country anymore, but a developing country, it gives you perspective. And for me, it taught me how to be grateful for the things that I have. You know, I was always outside the wire with my commander, and you see how the people lived in mud huts and the way they had to dig miles and miles just to get water to live and to grow, because it's a big agricultural country. And just the gratitude that they showed us. Like, the news doesn't always show the positive, but most of the people were very friendly towards us, and, you know, would give us soda and bread and just, you know, talk to us about their experience and how some of them were happy we were there, and others, you know, they had their problems. But it just teaches you just to be great, you know, practice gratitude and just be, you know, practice humility for the things that you have. So when I actually made it out of there because of my teammates, because of my fellow comrades, I mean, I owe it to them. You know, they put their lives on the line to save my life. So, you know, 21 years later, it's like I don't keep in touch with them anymore, but it's like I feel like I owe them my absolute best because I wasn't able to complete the mission with them. But through this injury, I was able to find another mission that has propelled me for the past 21 years and hopefully beyond.
Thank you. Leanne?
So what advice would you offer to others, especially females, facing some of life's toughest obstacles or challenges?
Well, as a female veteran, compared to and maybe I should have answered this in the other question, you know, it's different for us because men, they come home and they kind of just continue on with their life. They connect with their buddies and they go to the, you know, whatever clubs they're part of, and they continue on. Women, we play a number of different roles. We leave the military, we go back either into isolation, or we have a spouse that we have to take care of. We have kids that we have to take care of, and we're still working, and we still have our own baggage that we have to handle and navigate. So it's tough. So I would challenge a female, and probably just not even a veteran female, but just a civilian female, American patriot, you know, find your community, find people you can connect with. Yeah, a lot of people out there are not going to connect with a woman that's missing a arm, but that doesn't have to be the central theme of who I am as a person. I'm just trying to connect with all of you all. I'm just trying to get you to understand, you know, my story, and you share your story. So just finding maybe peer support, that community that you can lean on. And that's what Wounded Warrior Project has done for me. And I'm just not relying on Wounded Warrior Project. Like I said, there's thousands of other service organizations out there and you know, that you can connect with. You know, I'm a part of the YMCA community. I'm a part of the Taekwondo community, you know, so I'm constantly reaching to find my community. It's just not veterans, because you know, veterans can be, you know, they can have, you know, borders on. So I want those other worldly views to connect with people. And so isolation is not going to do it. You know, self-medicating with drugs and liquor, that's not going to do it. That's not going to bring you closer to wellness. And so the goal has got to be community, you know, friends, family. You got to learn to have fun. I have fun with this. Sometimes I have some pretty cool jokes. You know, I'm just living, because I know when you're looking at mortality face to face, it is not pretty. It is not pretty. So I'm trying to live each day to the fullest and make sure my cup is always full. And I'm trying to leave a lasting legacy for my son. That's why I started off with, how will you measure your life? You know, sometimes we measure with numbers and what we make and, you know, our KPIs and perform. That's not a true testament. But what you leave to your offspring and how you can impact people outside in the world, that's what it's about. So I challenge those women to get off that couch, you know, learn how to take care of yourself emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, financially. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. So that's my stance on that.
So Danielle, we had 2 questions each, and this question just popped into my head. Because
come on, Leonard, give me grace.
Yeah, I know. You mentioned it earlier. So what I'd like to know is that, do you celebrate or do you reflect quietly on your alive date?
So I don't look at it as an alive date, first of all, because I didn't die and come back. Okay. I wasn't one of those people that, you know, I died and I saw the what is it, the tunnel, the white tunnel,
yep.
And
white light.
the white light. That was not me at all. So, you know, when I look at May 25th, 2004, it's a celebration. Last year I bought myself a nice fancy little watch. Or, you know, the year before that, I talked to my son about what happened to me, and so for me, it's a celebration. It's almost like a birthday. My birthday's in January, so when I'm up north, it's normally cold, but in May I can celebrate. And maybe that's just by myself, just relying on my faith, just getting on my knees and praying, thank you that I'm still here, to be impactful and to make a difference and to spread joy and to expose myself so maybe other people can put themselves out there to start to heal. And like I said, I got a legacy now. I have a 10-year-old. So I can't afford, like I said earlier, I can't afford to be looking in the rearview mirror. I got to be present and I got to be forward thinking, because one day he's going to be a man and he can't see that his mama is wounded. And if she is wounded, she has the resources to pull herself out of that hole.
So Danielle, first of all, I just want to express my heartfelt appreciation for your remarkable story that you shared today. Your personal insights are truly enlightening. And I was particularly intrigued by your perspective on measuring your life. So for you, what a living example of perseverance, honesty, and most importantly of all, Danielle, grace.
Thank you.
So on behalf of Teleperformance, Citizen of the World, and our Veterans Employee Resource Group, the VERG, we appreciate you sharing your experience and your heart with us today. So
You're
thank
welcome.
you. Thank you. It was a gift to us. Again, thank you. And lastly, Danielle, just what a great testament of leading by example. So thank you, and also thank the Wounded Warrior Project.
Absolutely. Thank you. This is why I'm still on this earth 21 years later, to share moments like this. Appreciate you all.
Danielle, our employees, they take a survey at the end of every year, and they let me know and let our CSR department know what organizations they're passionate about and what they want to give to every year.
Mm-hmm.
Wounded Warrior Project, for the last 4 years, I think, has been at the very top of that list. And so we're proud to be able to fundraise for you guys every year. Our employees are going to do it again this year. I hope that this podcast gives them some education, some perspective on why they not only choose this organization to give to every year, but, why you should give to this organization every year. So we're proud to, I think 4 years running now, to do our best to raise some money for you guys. Our employees, they're very giving employees, and we allow them to do payroll contributions for organizations like Wounded Warrior. And, we don't want to throw an organization out there that they don't want to give to. So we love to be able to put these podcasts together to give them, a good education and heartfelt story and reasons why, if you didn't know anything about Wounded Warrior, say you came into the company after the survey closed or whatever, you didn't even get to vote, you're still going to learn a lot. And we appreciate you today so much for coming and sharing your story with us.
Thank you. It's always an honor to share.